Good morning, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Mary Ellen, and I'd like to thank Michael and Randy for giving me the opportunity to share some thoughts on the reading this morning. I'm going to use a few slides, so I'm just going to share my screen here. With thanks to David for coaching me through this. In the last year of my mom's life, when she was 91 and sharp as a tack, she was watching Daily Mass on TV, and she said to me, honestly, some of these Bible readings, I don't know what on earth we're supposed to get out of them. When I saw that today's reading was the beheading of John the Baptist, I must say I kind of had the same reaction as my mom. What kind of useful reflection could I offer on this gruesome story of John's beheading, especially in the middle of summer, when we might want something lighter, and especially after this year? But with the Bible, it's always interesting to pay attention to what you resist. So I decided not to ask Randy if I could choose another reading. So in reflecting on the passage that Victor read so well for us, I'd like to share three main thoughts. Firstly, that Mark did not intend for us to understand this story as a literal eyewitness account. So he uses literary devices to show us there is a deeper meaning. Secondly, taking this story literally can have harmful effects. And thirdly, Mark's theme here, that there is risk in following Jesus, is relevant for our times. At first glance, this story does read like an eyewitness account of intrigue at the palace of King Herod, resulting in the death of John the Baptist, his head brought into the banquet on a platter. But Mark is hardly an eyewitness to this story because he actually wrote his gospel 30 years after the death of Jesus. Mark intends a much more layered meaning to this story than meets the eye. To get at this deeper meaning, biblical scholars often think of each gospel as a string of pearls. The pearls are the stories, parables, sermons, miracles from Jesus' life and teaching that got passed down orally or in writing to the gospel writers. The string joining the pearls is how the writer joins, edits, and arranges the stories for his particular understanding of Jesus, his theology of who Jesus was. As an aside, here is an image of a papyrus fragment measuring only 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters and thought to be the earliest fragment we have of the Gospel of Mark. It was found in an Egyptian garbage dump, along with hundreds of thousands of other fragments in 1903. The work of scripture scholars piecing and comparing various found manuscripts such as this from ancient times that were copied and edited by scribes in various languages over centuries is like detective work that is still very much ongoing. So let's do some detective work of our own on Mark's arranging and telling of this story. Mark uses a literary sandwich technique with this story in chapter 6. So last week we heard about the disciples being sent out on a mission. What follows today is the story of the death of John the Baptist. And next week we pick up the story with the disciples returning. Reading this chapter can cause a reader to say, wait, what? The death of John the Baptist, it doesn't belong here. And that is Mark's purpose, to sandwich this story in between the two others, to show and to say that there is risk in following Jesus. He also foreshadows that, like John, Jesus will be imprisoned and brutally executed for hearing the cry of the poor and the marginalized, for speaking truth to power of the corrupt powers of his day. A second literary device Mark uses is to weave through the story images from the Old Testament. So it is a fact that Herod and Herodias were illegally married. It's a historical fact that Herod feared John the Baptist and his followers were planning an uprising. It is a historical fact that Herod imprisoned him and put him to death. But layered on top of these historical facts are images from the book of Esther in the Old Testament of a king, a banquet, guests, a young girl pleasing to the king, and even the king swearing an oath to give half his kingdom. Herod, in the story we heard today, was in fact not a king in his real time under the Roman Empire, and he did not have a kingdom to offer the young girl who was dancing, his stepdaughter. Mark uses this layering of Old Testament images here to highlight that it is John the Baptist and Jesus, not Herod, who are the leaders with true authority. Mark also draws on the description of Elijah for his depiction of John the Baptist in his gospel, of a hairy man with a leather belt, like this Sunday school coloring book. And I have it on the best authority that a member of our community, Carol Cooper, also dressed up as John the Baptist one Sunday for a service at St. Jude's years ago. Again, it's not John's literal grooming habits or wardrobe that is important for Mark, but rather the symbolic reference to Elijah, that John the Baptist speaks truth to power, as Elijah did before him. So before closing, the trouble with taking this story literally is that we not only miss what Mark is trying to convey, but that such an interpretation can be harmful. A literal interpretation of this story has been expressed in art, poetry, even operas over the centuries, perpetuating negative stereotypes of women. As a poet alarmingly wrote in 1843 about Herodias, "Whether she was saint or devil, I don't know. With women, never can one know where ends the angel and where the devil makes his entrance." To close, I wanted to leave you with two modern day examples of the risk of following Jesus. My friend, Sister Veronica Dunn, who lives in Winnipeg, is part of a religious order that incidentally was not involved in residential schools, chose not to be, but has international chapters of local nuns, including in Myanmar. The picture bottom left was taken this past March, as these women religious were protesting the military regime publicly, when people were being shot for doing so. The picture on the upper left is Sister Anne Rose Newtong, begging heavily armed police officers to spare the children behind her, risking her own life that they may be saved. Myanmar may be out of our news cycle, but these women and many others calling for justice are still there, speaking truth to power as brave witnesses. The second example that has been transformative for me in the last year is the way that our own community at Incarnation has gone out to bring in the voices of our community and beyond related to Black Lives Matter, a speaker for the legacy of residential schools in the 60s scoop, the essential stories of frontline workers, a celebration of inclusion during Pride Month, and ongoing learning about issues related to care for creation, that we might learn and act and possibly raise a little prophetic hell for justice. In summary, when we wonder what on earth the Bible passage has to say to us, it can be an opportunity to explore more deeply, as we strive to do each Sunday here. Hopefully this morning we might go away pondering what risking being the change means in our own lives, and we might offer our own teaspoon of salt as salt for the earth. Perhaps risking learning about an issue more, speaking up for justice, writing a letter of thanks or petition, changing a habit that helps the earth, forgiving a friend, doing justice, as Micah says, loving kindness, and walking humbly with our God. If we each just offer our teaspoon as salt for the earth, that indeed would spread the good news of Jesus Christ that Mark intended for us to share. May it be so.